Okay, so thank you once again to all the participants who joined in for the session today. And thank you to team teacher class for giving me this opportunity to share my expertise with my co-participants here in the session. So today's session is about lesson planning. And before I begin with the session, I would like to request the participants to feel free to ask any queries that you have, post it in the chat. And as Anuj already said, intermittently we'll be taking some breaks and we will go through the questions that you have shared in the chat, and I will be happy to answer them. So feel free to ask whatever doubts that you have. On that note, I'm going to start with the session with a question for all of you to answer first. What are your thoughts on lesson planning? And I would request Anuj to share it with me, their thoughts, because I don't think I'm able to see that.
Sure, ma'am. So teachers, please do share your thoughts on lesson planning. What do you think, like, or do you feel like lesson planning today? Good evening, very ma'am.
So you could, I'm just giving you some pointers here. You may talk about whether you think it is needed or you think you need some help in that. And you could also add what are your expectations for today's session, because this is on lesson planning. So what exactly do you want to know? And how comfortable are you in writing a lesson plan?
So Ranjana may have shared that what to do and how to do in class explanation of topics to be done.
Okay, all right.
Thanks, Ranjana ma'am.
So feel free. Okay. All right. So
framing lesson plans, make student-centric lesson plans.
Okay, great.
Objectives included, Bloom-based learning objectives.
Okay, great. So Bloom-based learning objectives is what you want to know, or you already using it?
Systematic presentation of content for education to happen. Lesson plan help us to launch, explain, and reach the children in better manner. I like to do it because the motive of teaching topic is clear.
Excellent.
Yeah, okay. Anjali ma'am shared that she want to know.
Okay, she wants to know that. All right, great. So thank you everyone for sharing in your thoughts. On that note, I'm going to share my screen and take you through the presentation that I've prepared for the day. And let's have a nice interaction. So feel free to use the chat. I'm going to share the screen, and Anuj, please you'll have to let me know whether it is visible. So I think I'll click on desktop and share.
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Yeah, okay. So this is what it is about. All gathered here for this lesson planning to meet competency-based outcomes. Okay, so as educators, we've all been planning lessons, and that's one of the main aspects we have been doing to be able to conduct our classes in the best possible way. So everybody has some basic idea about lesson planning. There are no right and wrong ways of planning a lesson, but what we are going to be addressing today is what should be the planning to meet competency-based outcomes. Okay, so I am not going to share with you any template or any framework as such. So I'm going to be helping you people to understand how to plan a lesson when it comes to meeting the competency-based outcomes. Okay, so that is going to be my goal for today, or my objective for today. I'm going to actually, okay, just a second. So I am in the presenter mode, I hope. Yes? No, not yet.
Not yet.
Just a second. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the objectives for today's session. Understand competency-based education, writing learning outcomes. So somebody asked me about Bloom's taxonomy and how do we use that. So we will be addressing that here. And what exactly is going to be the change in the lesson planning methodology when it comes to competency-based education is about backward planning. And last, we are going to be talking about the engage model, which is a new model which talks about teaching and learning practices. So my objective for today is going to be helping you to understand what is competency-based education, how the lesson plan has to be modified according to that, and what kind of planning that you need to do. And with the help of engage model, we will see how we can integrate what we learn in the engage model in our lesson plan. Okay, so that's the objective for today. With that objective set, I'm going to go to the next slide. The next slide is, what do you mean by competence? Okay, so competency is a very commonly used term. We use it very commonly, saying that she is a competent teacher, or she is a competent nurse, or he is a competent engineer. Okay, so what exactly is competency? Competency is a combination of three aspects. It is knowledge, it is skill, and attitude. Okay, so competency is a combination, very nicely put in the slide, that it's a dynamic combination of knowledge, skill, and attitude. And because we're talking about students, competency with respect to students is the combination of knowledge, skill, and attitude which we want our students to develop and apply for a successful life, learning, and also in their workplace. So competency is a very, very important aspect. As I said, it's a combination of three things. Generally, when we talk about competency, a lot of times we talk about only skill, but it is not only about the skill. It's a combination of knowledge, skill, and attitude. Let me give an example over here. If you're talking about a very competent teacher, we say that he or she is a very competent teacher. That means he or she has the subject knowledge, one. Two, has the skill that is required to deliver it in the class. Three, has the right attitude, to understand the students, has the right attitude to get along with the co-teachers. So the combination of all three is important when we're talking about competency. So even when you're talking about a competent nurse, the nurse needs to have knowledge about what she's doing, and she has to be skillful enough in doing her job, and the right attitude. We are sometimes very happy when we see a particular nurse coming towards us, and the other time we dread, oh, probably the attitude is not correct, or probably they're not skilled enough. Okay, so the meaning of competency, I hope everybody is understood that it's a combination of knowledge, skill, and attitude. Okay, so we want our students to be competent. We want to have various competencies developed in our students, and that is why competency-based education has come into picture. When do students develop competency, or when do they show competency? For them to develop competency, you need to create situations which are challenging for them, which they are unfamiliar with. So if I am put in a situation which is same throughout and there is nothing challenging for me, I will not be able to explore the potentials that I have. I will not be able to explore the competencies that I have, or even develop the competencies in that matter. So when we are talking about a competency-based education model, you know that we're talking about developing skill, knowledge, and attitude in our students. And to be able to do that, we need to create situations in the class which are unfamiliar, which are challenging, which are engaging for the students. Okay. Now, how do the competencies help the students? Competencies bring about overall development in the students, not only knowledge, it is not only skill, it's not only attitude, it's a combination of all the three. And that's going to help them not only to be a successful human being in life, in the process of learning, when they are learning in school, in college, or even in their workplaces, because it's going to help them throughout their life. Okay. Also, the third aspect that I'm going to be talking about competencies is it helps children to understand what they already know and helps them develop more on that. Let me give an example. Like if I know that I am competent in a particular language. Okay, so I have a particular language skill and I am competent in that. That will help me to develop further in that particular area. But if I don't have the competency, and if that competency is not developed in me, probably I'll always dread that area. I would not want to venture into that area. You may also have seen students who are competent or good enough in a particular language, their language skills are good, they are also able to solve math word problems. And a lot of times we see that students who are not very good at language skills, they are not able to understand math word problems. So a competency helps children to develop further competencies and to grow in that particular area as well. I hope it is clear so far. I'm moving to the next slide. So we've understood what is competency. The next slide is about okay. All right. So what is competency-based education? Okay. In order to know this first, I would want all of you to take an activity, which is a Mentimeter activity. I would want you all to go to menti.com. Is my screen visible here? I think yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So you need to go to menti.com and type in the code 42037459. And the question is, why is competency-based education needed? So there are three responses that you can give. Write what comes to your mind. Why do you think competency-based education is needed? I'll repeat it again. You will go to menti.com and type in the code 42037459. And the question is, why is competency-based education needed? So feel free to put in your thoughts. Why is there so much discussion, so much that is being talked about competency-based education? How is it different than the traditional education that we've been a part of for so many years? And why the need to bring in this? Okay, so I see the first response here. So for success in life, all-round development, and social development. Excellent. It's more learner-centric. Great. To develop expertise. I really like this one. To develop mastery or expertise, because until now, that wasn't happening to the extent that we were expecting. To develop their thoughts, great. To inculcate skills, very good, very good. To improve efficiency, critical thinking, thinking skills, great. Social emotional needs. I have a great set of participants today, I think. To enable each child to take on the changing world. I will also add the word changing and the challenging world. Great. So you know that education is not restricted only to imparting knowledge, but you're actually preparing the child for tomorrow with the necessary knowledge, skill, and attitude. And with so much of emphasis on the 21st century skills, whether it is creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, problem solving, all of that which we want our learners to have. And all of that will be possible only if we change our methodology of teaching, we change it to competency-based education. Great, right. Great. Develop emotional quotient. So I have everything that I was looking for. So you all agree that competency-based education is the need of the hour. On that note, let me go back to my PPT. Okay. All right. So here we are. So why competency-based education? So I got lovely answers from all of you. I am going to take you to this particular slide, which says that competency-based education is a system of education in which students advance upon mastery. So somebody said we wanted them to be experts in that particular field, or we wanted to have expertise. We wanted to have mastery and not have only students just passing from one grade to the other without being sure about whether they have met the expected learning outcomes. So when you talk about traditional teaching or traditional learning, it meant that students go to school, there is a fixed syllabus, there is a textbook, there is a teacher who is the sole giver, provider of the knowledge. The students learn from the teacher, they learn from the textbook, and then there are stipulated, scheduled dates for exams. Students give exams, and then they are promoted to the next class on the basis of the grades that they get in the exams. Okay, so this was the traditional methodology that we had followed, but it didn't give us the required result. So in fact, the results were alarming in a lot of cases where we saw that the students may not have developed the mastery or the expected learning outcomes, and they're just graduating or progressing from one class to the other. And that is the reason there was a need to shift the entire process of education in a manner that it is outcome driven. Okay, so we have a goal set for every topic, and every action of ours is driven towards that particular goal. So it is driven towards the outcome. So competency based education is essentially an outcome based approach. Okay, and it also means our learners should be able to show explicitly observable, measurable change in their behavior, change in the behavior in terms of knowledge, skill, and attitude, which should be observable, which should be measurable. That is important. Okay, and that is in turn going to benefit the students. It's going to empower the students. Okay, it also means that we need to provide timely support and differentiated support. When the moment we use the word differentiated, you know that it is more individualistic. It's not about the entire class together. We need to identify, we need to understand each of the students and cater to their requirements depending upon their individual learning needs, and not have one program fit everybody kind of a philosophy. It has to be individualistic. Okay, and learning outcomes involve the application and creation of knowledge along with the development of important skills and dispositions. So another important aspect about competency-based education is that it believes in the constructivist approach of learning, which says that students inherently have this ability to construct knowledge. You don't have to give them knowledge. You don't have to provide them with knowledge. You need to facilitate, you need to create situations, give them opportunities for them to construct their own knowledge. So it's not about you teaching them, it is about you providing them with opportunities. So it's about creation of knowledge, the constructivist approach. So I have listed some important aspects about competency-based education. On that, I'm going to move to the next slide. We've already done this. Okay, so these are the 4 pillars of competency-based education. One is objective, the next one is content, third is pedagogy, and fourth is assessment. All these four terminologies are not new to any of you. Okay, everybody is aware of what is an objective, what do you mean by content, pedagogy, and assessment. I am going to be talking about it with respect to competency-based education. Okay, so when you're talking about objective, objective is the goal. Okay, so you start with the goal. I want my students to be able to add 2-digit numbers if I'm talking about one particular topic in maths. My objective is I want my students to analyze the difference between a formal letter and an informal letter. So that is my objective, my goal. So I start with my goal. And to meet this goal, what should be my content? Okay. So when you're talking about content with respect to competency-based education, the content has to be the core concepts. Okay. Gone are the days when we thought that more the content given to the students, more is the knowledge that they acquire. That's not the case. Okay. So here we are going to be identifying the concepts which are the core concepts which are needed. Okay. And not just keep on throwing a lot of content to the students. Okay, so as teachers, it is we to decide what is important, what should I be teaching in the class so that I reach my objective. So I said you always start with an objective, saying that this is the learning outcome. This is what I want my learners to be able to demonstrate at the end of my class or at the end of this particular topic. And likewise, to meet that, what should I be teaching? So you need to filter, you need to segregate, you need to sort the content properly. Okay. And when I say segregate, sort, and filter the content, make sure you don't miss out on something that is very important. Okay. So when I said that content need not be too much, you need to ensure that you include all that, which is important for the students. Okay. Then when you're talking about pedagogy, pedagogy is again, it involves everything about the teaching, learning strategies that the teachers and the learners indulge in the class. Okay. So when we talk about pedagogy with respect to competency-based education, it is about what you already said in the Mentimeter activity. It has to be student-centric. It has to be inclusive. Teacher has to be a guide. Teacher has to be a facilitator. And the pedagogy has to be, or the teaching learning activity has to be challenging, has to be empowering for the students. So the teacher has to decide, if I need to meet this learning outcome, what kind of activity should I be having in my class? So if I want my students to be able to display great communication skills, if that's my objective, then in that case, I need to have activities created in the class where they would be able to participate in group discussions, where they'll be able to debate with each other. Unless and until I create situations like that in the class, I will not be able to reach the learning outcome or reach the objective that I have set. So pedagogy is a very, very important aspect of competency-based education. And what kind of pedagogy, or what kind of strategies or teaching learning activity should you be having in the class? It has to be collaborative, it has to be engaging, it has to be active learning method. It could be flipped learning, it could be technology integrated learning, it could be AI. So a variety of things that could be included in the class so as to create an environment which is full of academic rigor and provides challenging situations and generates curiosity in the minds of the students to learn. Okay, so that's about competency-based education related to pedagogy. Okay, and assessment with respect to competency-based education is a very, very important aspect. So unlike the traditional method wherein we decide what is to be taught, how it is to be taught, and then we assess. Maybe through summative assessments, or maybe through unit tests, through some formative assessments, and we assess whether the students have reached the expected learning outcome or met the objective that we have set. With respect to CBE or competency-based education, the focus is more on formative assessments. The focus is more on assessment for learning. Unlike summative assessments, unlike evaluations, wherein we say that, okay, the child has scored this much marks and this is the grade, the child now goes to the next class. Okay, that's not our objective. The objective is not to decide whether the child will be able to go to the get promoted to the next class or no. The objective is to develop all of these skills in the children. And as teachers, our job is not to give them a scorecard saying that this is what is your score, but to be able to help them to understand when they are right now and what should be provided to them, what remediation should be provided to them so that they reach the learning outcome. Okay, so formative assessments are very, very important. So when you're talking about formative assessments, you know that it has to be stress free. It cannot be taken in isolation. You cannot say that children, I'm going to be teaching this, and maybe next week we will have a test on this. That is also okay sometimes. I'm not saying that that's not needed, but at the same time, assessment in CBE has to be integrated. So if I am talking to you about maybe the 4 pillars of competency based education, so this is my small curriculum that I delivered to you. I have to integrate assessment within this. Okay, so I would ask you, okay, what are the 4 pillars of competency based? As simple as that. So I could just find out whether you've understood this particular part and whether you'll be able to demonstrate it whenever a situation demands you to demonstrate a skill based on this particular unit that is taught. So assessments have to be integrated. It cannot be taken in isolation. Okay. So I'm not saying that summative assessment is not important. Formative, summative, all of them are important. But as I said, our task, our objective is not to decide whether a child passes or fails, but to help the child grow, to develop, to reach the desired outcomes. Okay. So in that case, assessments become very, very important. On that note, I'm going to be moving to the next slide. I don't know why it's not going to the next slide.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm not able to move to the next slide. Let me just check.
Yeah.
Maybe again. Yes. All right. So we did this. We spoke about the 4 pillars. One is objective, content, pedagogy, and assessment. So I've spoken enough about objectives, content, pedagogy, and assessment. So just a quick summary of what it is. So learning objectives is about what is it that the students are supposed to perform. So what is my goal? What do I want my students to perform at the end of the lesson, at the end of the learning process? Okay. Content is what should be, what kind of knowledge or what knowledge should my students have to be able to demonstrate that kind of an outcome. Pedagogy, what kind of learning environment should I be creating? What should be my teaching activities in the class so that students are able to demonstrate that kind of a learning? I have finished teaching, let's say, and I want them to demonstrate the learning. So I'm going to be assessing them to see whether they are able to demonstrate that they have learned. So when we say that we want our students to learn, we want our students to understand. So how are we sure that the students have learned it? Okay, that is only when they demonstrate. So that is why learning outcome is very, very important, which are observable behavioral changes in the learners. Okay, so it is all about demonstrating what they have learned. I'm moving to the next one, and this slide is about the difference between objectives and learning outcomes. So when you're talking about planning a lesson, as per CBE, your learning outcomes become the focus point. That's the most important. So your goal is the most important. Okay. So a lot of times educators have this confusion in their mind about what is an objective and what is a learning outcome. And a lot of times we use it as synonyms as well. Okay, that's okay. But technically speaking, objectives are teacher centric. So I may say that I want my students to understand the difference between a formal letter and an informal letter. That is teacher centric. That is what I want to achieve. The moment I speak about learning outcomes, it is with respect to the learner. What kind of behavior will the learner or is expected to show after the unit or at the end of the learning process? Meaning, the student will be able to evaluate the different types of letters, okay, in a given stipulated time period. Okay, that is a learning outcome because this is with respect to the learner and it is an observable, measurable change. So when you say that I want my students to understand this, I want my students to learn this, I want to teach this to my students, they are not measurable as such. So when you say that my student is explaining, my student is analyzing, my student is displaying, demonstrating. So all these are action words, and you know that all these action words, we take it from Bloom's taxonomy. Depending upon what level of learning do we want to attain with our learners, okay? So when it comes to writing or designing learning outcomes, you know that you need to keep in mind certain aspects. And the thumb rule is to write a learning outcome, you need to have an action verb. An action verb, and the best resource for this is your Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, plus the object of the verb and the phrase indicating the level of achievement. So, to what expertise are you expecting the students to get? Like when I say I want my students to be able to add single digit numbers, okay, so I'm laying a condition over there that I'm limiting it to single digit, or I want them to be explaining the factors of maybe responsible for corrosion. So what do I want from them? I want them to list any two factors. So I'm laying a condition. You may or may not lay a condition. That depends entirely on you. So as I said, you cannot have learning outcomes at a go for the entire topic. So you'll have to divide your topic into smaller subtopics. And for each of those subtopics, you will have a learning outcome, maybe one or more than one learning outcomes. And based on that learning outcome, then you design what should be the content and what should be my teaching methodology. Okay, I've taken two examples here just to help you to understand how to frame a learning outcome. A lot of times teachers are confused with this particular aspect. So a learning outcome has to be measurable. Okay, and it becomes measurable only when you include actionable words or action verbs or measurable verbs from your Bloom's taxonomy. As I said, that is an important resource. Okay, so one example that I've listed here is, by the end of the lesson, I want my student to be able to analyze the factors responsible for corrosion and make a presentation under the guidance of the teacher. So this is my learning outcome for a small unit that I'm going to teach my student, which means that I'm ensuring that the students gain expertise good enough to analyze. That means they first know what is corrosion, they know what are the factors responsible for corrosion, and now they're able to analyze between the various factors responsible for corrosion. So I'm taking the level up when I'm asking them to analyze. So it all depends upon to what level are we wanting to take our learners. Do we want them to be restricted to the mere understanding of facts and only remembering the facts and remembering the concepts, or do we want them to apply, analyze, and create concepts? Okay, so again, in this learning outcome that is designed, constructed, I've written that I want them to make a presentation under the guidance of the teacher. So I've laid a condition over here that it will be under the guidance of the teacher, and and I want them to make a presentation. So you see that I'm expecting them to be able to analyze the factors and also be able to present it to the rest of them. So in one learning outcome, I'm able to achieve more than one skill from my learner. So again, I'm emphasizing, and I would like to stress a lot on this, that your learning outcomes become your goal when it comes to teaching through competency-based education. Okay. All right. Again, I'm stuck here. Yeah. So here I would want everybody to share their thoughts. Okay, this is for everybody. Teachers spend 70% of their time in what to teach and 30% on how to teach. Do you agree? I would want you all to share your thoughts in the chat, and Anuj, I would request you to share it with me. I'm going to take a pause of 2 minutes here, waiting for you people to put in your thoughts.
Sure. So Ranjana ma'am is sharing that it should be opposite.
Okay, great.
And there are some also questions. So do you want to take the question now or later?
Yes, we can take a question.
Sure. So Sudha ma'am has asked a particular question like, should the lesson plan have words like learning objective and learning outcome?
Okay, so again, as I said, you may have both learning objectives and learning outcomes, but I think learning outcomes suffice, okay, because it is more learner centric. So you will not be able to attain the learning outcome if you don't have a learning objective in place. So you may or may not. There are no hard and fast rules, but I would definitely emphasize on including learning outcomes in your lesson plan for sure. We can take another question. Yeah.
So other teachers are saying, some of them teachers are agree, few of them saying no. So one of the teachers said it is 50-50 ratio of for what and how, and more important is how to teach.
Okay.
And Krishna ma'am has shared that said that she think that 70% on how to teach. We should focus on 70% how to teach, and most of teachers are agree with your with the thought.
Okay, all right. Okay, great. So it's going to be a revelation now. Okay, so normally this is what we think, and this is what we do. Okay, we spend 70% of our time on what to teach and 30% on how to teach. I really appreciate some of you who said that it should be the opposite. It should be 30% on what to teach and 70% of your time should be invested in how to teach. That is the requirement. Having said that, even now, if you go back through your lesson plans, I would want you all to revisit your lesson plans and see in your lesson plans, see whether how much of time do you think you devoted to what of the lesson, and how much in your lesson plan have you devoted to how to teach of the lesson. Okay, so even today, most of us tend to, when we're writing our lesson plans, we tend to write more or tend to stress more on what I need to teach this, I need to teach this, I need to teach this, this will be taught, this will be taught, this will be taught, and a little, very little of what we write on how am I going to teach that, how am I going to teach the second topic, how am I going to teach the third aspect. Okay, so this is a general practice, and this is what we need to change. Okay, so as per the requirement, as per the changing scenario, what is needed is more emphasis on how, what methods, what tools do I use, what methodology, what pedagogy do I use in the class, what kind of group learning methods or group activities, what kind of debates, what kind of discussions that we have is what we need to focus. And the focus is lesser on the content, because you have to agree with me that content is available everywhere now. We are not the sole givers. It's available at the click of a finger. So it's available everywhere. You don't have to be giving them. They're smart enough to get it. What is expected of us is that, are we giving them the opportunity, creating the situations in the class for them to develop the skill, the knowledge, and be able to demonstrate all of that in the class. Okay? So that is what it is. On this, I am going to be basing the next slide. And the next slide is the engage model, which is a new model with respect to teaching and learning. And this was developed by Vicky Halsey, okay? And it is about delivering real life content to your students. So when we are talking about preparing our students for life, preparing our students to be successful in life, even in their workplaces, to be able to contribute to the nation. So in that case, obviously, we need to prepare them with real life challenges. So we can't be talking to them and preparing them within the four walls of our classroom and talking to them about what is there in their books and something else that is going on in the outside world. So you need to bring in the challenges of the outside world into your classroom through case studies, through a lot of challenges, through a lot of opportunities that you need to create. So this model is about that. So it is called as the engage model. Engage is an acronym for E stands for energize learner, N stands for navigate content, G for generate meaning, A apply to real world, G gauge and celebrate, E extend learning to action. So this is a very, very interesting model and which can be easily applied in our classroom. So I'm going to be talking about how the engage model can be integrated, included in your lesson. Okay. So let me go to the next slide. So as I said, E stands for energize. So what do you mean by energize? So let me relate it to our set inductions. So we've been doing this for ages. So you know that when you're going to introduce a particular lesson, you always ensure that we create a nice set induction for the students. And the purpose of doing that is to be able to arouse curiosity in the minds of the students. Okay. So unless and until your students are interested to learn, maximum learning would not take place. No matter how good a teacher you are, how many years of experience that you have, if you're not able to develop interest and curiosity in the minds of the students, maximum level of learning may not be able to be attained. Okay. So the first E stands for energizing your learners. And if you energize your learners, you engage them. As simple as that. So how do you energize your learners? It could be through a nice set induction. It could be something that you do even before the class, not only when you start the class. Before your class, maybe you can share with them a podcast saying that this is what is going to be done tomorrow. Okay, an interesting mail, an interesting image that you share. Look at this image. We're going to be talking about this and a little more interesting aspect about this in the class tomorrow. Okay, so you are actually developing curiosity in the minds of the students. When you're energizing the students, make sure as an educator that you also share with them the learning outcomes. So when we're talking everything about learning outcomes, it's imperative, it's important that you share with the learners that today students, at the end of 35 minutes, this is what you will be able to do. Okay, that is very important. As a teacher, if you want your learners to be able to do, they better know it, that this is expected from them. And that will prepare them mentally to be ready to accept, to grasp what you're going to be teaching to them. Okay. Navigate content is about the content. So how we're going to take them through the content. So I said it's not about how much of what you teach, it's about what you teach and how you teach. Okay. So challenge the learners through interactive activities. That is how you navigate through the content. Okay. You take them through the content. Generate meaning means you've taught them, they've learned it, they've understood it. Now it is time for them to reflect. Okay. So when you allow them to reflect, you allow them to think that how is it relevant? How is it relevant to what they already learned, what they already knew, and what is new that they've learned to do? So you can have a KWLH, what they know, what they want to know, what they've learned, and how they are going to be learning. So generating meaning of what they learn is very, very important. So it is here when the students reflect, you can have the aha moment with them. They think, this is what I really liked about the session today. This is what I learned, or probably this is what I need to understand better. So generate meaning is a very, very important aspect. Apply to real world. I said the entire model is based about how we prepare students for the real world. So once they've learned the content, they need to apply it. So you give a real life scenario, maybe in the form of a case study, presented to them. They are still working within the four walls of this classroom in a secure learning environment. They haven't gone out into the real world, but you're bringing the concepts into the real world, okay, into the classroom, and giving it to them to be able to apply the content that they've learned in a new scenario. Okay, so that is applying it to a real world. As I said, this is still within the learning environment. So you're just providing them with maybe the text, the content, the videos, the case studies, whatever you think is appropriate, and bring real life challenges into the classroom. Then gauge and celebrate. Gauge is assessment. And I've already spoken enough about how assessment for learning is important rather than assessment of learning. Okay. So gauge means assess, and celebrate. Celebration is important because it depends as to how the assessment is. Assessments can be stressful. Assessments can be empowering also. So it all depends upon what kind of assessment that you subject your students to. Do they feel empowered? Oh, I learned something new after this particular assessment. That empowers them. Okay, so gauging and celebrating is the next step. And extend learning to action. This is very, very important. So we're done with the entire cycle of learning. What is really important is for students to now demonstrate that they have the competency. And how do they demonstrate it? Now, this could be outside the classroom as well. It could be in the form of a project that they participate in. It could be a forum that they're participating in. It could be a campaign that they are leading with other students. So, or it could be a blog that they are sharing on what they have learned. So what have they done? They have extended the learning to a scenario outside. Okay, a very, very important aspect of the engage model. Okay, so lesson plans when it comes to competency-based education is backward planning. Normally, what do we do when we talk about planning? We start with what we need to do, 1, 2, 3, to reach the goal. That's how we plan. We need to reach the goal. In competency-based education, it is a backward planning that is needed. First is the goal. What do I want my students to do? What do I want my students to know at the end of the lesson? That's my goal. If I want them to know this, how do I test whether they have gained this? So assessment comes second. Please understand what I'm saying. Okay, first is your goal, your learning outcomes that you design, which is an important aspect. Then, how am I going to assess my students that they have gained all of these competencies? And then, for them to gain these competencies, what should be the content and what should be the learning activities? So it's a backward planning. Normally, what we do is we set up the objective, learning activities, assessment. That's how we do. But you see, in competency-based education, it's a backward planning. So I would want all of you to integrate the engage model, okay, into your lesson plans, so that if you're talking about what will be the energizer, so the teacher will do this, the students would do this, and these are the resources that I need for the energizer stage. If I'm talking about the second stage, that is navigating content, how am I going to take my students through the content? What will I do? So what will be the teacher activity? What are my students expected to do? So let's say the teacher will present a case study to a group of students, or students will be divided into groups and the teacher presents a case study and students have to understand, analyze the case study and make presentation. So that is my navigate content activity, teacher activity. So students will work in group, students will analyze the case and will make a presentation. So that will be the student activity. And what are the resources needed here? The resources could be the case studies that you need, or maybe some library material which the students, or the internet that they need to browse through to get some more information. So that's about backward planning. And yeah, I come to the end of my session here. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a wonderful presentation. Teacher has shared such a nice comment that they have enjoyed the session. Excellent, ma'am, nicely put. But there are also some questions which I'm going to share one by one.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'll share one by one. Teacher, if you have more questions, you can share in the chat. I'll try to take it to them as much as possible. Okay. So Anupama ma'am has asked that do we have a duration of lessons in competency-based lesson plans? Like there should be a duration of lessons?
Of course, yes. Because everything has to be time bound, right? Because unless and until we set a time frame, it's not going to lead us anywhere. So every lesson plan, the basic structure of a lesson plan, which was there earlier, which we've been following, will still apply. But then, as I said, we need to integrate some more aspects into it and modify it a little bit. But definitely, there will be a time frame for sure.
Okay. So one of the ma'am also asked that your presentation, your session is also based on the engage principle, which you have just shared.
Yes. I'm glad you noticed that.
Great. Shudha ma'am has also asked that some of the schools are using the 5 E's principle: engage, explore, elaborate, explain, and evaluate. So
Yes.
what are your thoughts or take on this, ma'am?
Absolutely. I think that is again a very good model. That's why I said I started with my session saying that there is no fixed template or framework that I'm going to suggest. That is again very, very good. But what I would suggest is to include more of learning outcomes into that. Okay, so with the 5E model, that is also good enough, but then include more of learning outcomes and accordingly design the activities of the teachers and the activities of the students. So when you're talking about the engage model, it also speaks about the 70-30 principle. I already listed one in the slide, that it should be 70% of the time that should be invested on how to teach and 30% on what to teach. It also says that 70% of the time students should be talking and 30% of the time is what teachers should be talking. So it's about the 70-30 rule. Okay. So your lesson plan, whether you're following the engage model or you're following the 5E model, all of it has to ensure that there is more activities for the students and less for the teachers. So if you are talking, it is boring. But if there is a conversation, it's engaging. It's as simple as that. So if you include the students, it becomes more engaging. So include the students. So that model is again very, very good. Incorporate some things that you like from this model into your lesson plans. It will only add its value. Yes.
Great. There are many questions, ma'am. I'll take one by one. Would you please also explain about the navigation aspect? Ma'am got confused in it. Can you like share it a quick overview on it?
Okay, so when we're talking about navigating the content, so content is what is to be taught, right? So once you know what is to be taught, the objective is how are you going to take your students through each of those concepts, right? So navigating through the content means, let me take an example. If I am talking about maybe corrosion, so the content is what is corrosion, what are the factors affecting corrosion, what are the ways to prevent corrosion, let's say. I'm just giving an example. So how are you going to navigate through this content? So what is corrosion? How am I going to teach? Okay. what are the factors affecting corrosion? What kind of learning environment am I going to create for my students so that they understand the factors affecting corrosion? Okay, so that is the meaning of navigating through the content. Okay, how are you going to take your learners through the content? What methodology are you going to use? What pedagogical practices are you going to employ in the class? That is about navigating through the content.
Okay. So Ranjana ma'am, for currently, as ma'am said, she doesn't have any templates or a lesson formats or lesson plan. But ma'am, Ranjana ma'am has asked that in the end, if possible, can you share some of the formats for lesson plans based on CBE, if possible? So ma'am, if you have some prepared lesson plans, if you can prepare, I'll try to share with the teachers as well.
Okay, I'll do one thing. I'll share it with Anuj. If you can then share it with them.
Yeah. Sure. That will work perfectly, ma'am. Okay. Anuradha ma'am has asked that from which class can we give case studies?
From which class? I wouldn't recommend. I think for sure you can use it from your 5th standard onwards. But then, you know what? It can be also done for the lower class, but depends upon what kind of case studies are you looking for. You know, I've come across school wherein they have their pre-primary students talking about problem solving, and you know what, the activity that they've done is about birds having water made available to the birds during the summer season, and students observing that and asking them questions like, why do you think they're facing this particular problem? So there is no fixed age group that I would say, but it again depends upon what kind of case studies are you looking for. Okay, so for sure the secondary students will be able to do, but then for the primary kids, you need to be choosing it wisely.
Great, ma'am. So before taking more questions, I just want to say, ma'am, thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. I hope teacher has enjoyed our session. And thank you so much for ma'am for your contribution, your time, your experience, and your knowledge to by sharing with our teachers. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much to all the participants. I really had a great time, and I really liked the type of questions that came throughout the session. Okay, thank you, Anuj, once again. So, shall I leave the session now?
Yes, ma'am. Can we take 2 more questions?
Yes, sure.
So teachers, if you got all your answer, please do sign up for our classes. I have shared the link in the message. In the chat, please do sign up for our classes. And as some of the teachers have raised the issue, they are receiving our email for the class meeting late. So we suggest please do join our Telegram channel so that you can get the meeting links on a prior basis and you don't have to wait for the email as well. So I'm again going to share the link of our Telegram channel. Do join it and you will get updates on an immediate basis, even on a prior basis. Okay, ma'am. I'll quickly share 2 more questions, and don't worry, teachers, we have more questions. We'll surely plan more sessions on lesson plans. You are asking some particular thing. We'll surely discuss with the ma'am and plan to conduct some sessions on it. So, okay, Anjali ma'am has asked that, would you also please, she's suggesting that if possible, can we conduct a session on specifically on Bloom's hot questions, like Bloom's taxonomy?
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah, ma'am. And one of the teacher has asked, do we need to prepare for a lessons plan or for a weekly plan? What is better and how it can be done? Like, what should we prefer?
See, different schools follow different pattern. Some of them have lesson plans and some have weekly plans, some have fortnightly, some have monthly plans. So irrespective of what methodology that you people follow, I think it is important to have all the aspects of a lesson plan intact. Okay, don't have shortcuts. See that every aspect is included in the lesson plan. Now, personally, I feel unit-wise plan is always better. In that way, you ensure that you don't miss out anything.
So great. Without now, I'm not going to take a much time of yours and or for the teachers as well. So thank you so much everyone for joining our session and staying till now. Thank you so much for all your participation and suggestion, even your wonderful comments. We are glad to have you all here. Please do join our upcoming sessions and do share the link with your peer teachers if you have enjoyed our sessions. Do share our message with other teachers as well so that we can uh, provide better services to all our teachers. So thank you so much, everyone.